Has this ever happened to you? I have a brand new water bottle, and I can see too much of it. A blank water bottle can be an unsightly bore. Luckily, using our patented technology, there is a solution. There is? There sure is. It's called stickers. These incredible devices are covered in glue on one end and funny, attractive designs on the other. They are the ideal solution for any water bottle in need of a little pizzazz. How do I acquire these stickers? Well, fictional customer, I'm glad you asked. Just go to wildgreenmemes.com, that's wildgreenmemes.com, to grab your very own Wild Green stickers. Wow, thanks, mister. Now what do I do about my fridge? Just wait until we tell this guy about magnets. wildgreenmemes.com.
This is Wild Green Streams. I'm Rhett.
I'm Io.
And today we're joined by Warren Carlyle, founder of OctoNation, the world's largest octopus fan club, to discuss what's going on with all these octos riding around on other animals like hats or cars or Han Solo from hiding from the Empire. Hi, Warren.
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing much.
What makes an octopus's arms and not either legs or tentacles? Because I used to think they were tentacles all the time, but then I was like, no, wait, that's like kind of different. It's like kind of with like squid have arms and then also tentacles, but then like, why not legs?
So yeah, octopuses have 8 arms. This is a big thing. We wrote a blog on it, so we could link it somewhere. But it was just arms versus tentacles, because most people, even when you see octopus for sale or whatever, like, oh, I love eating octopus tentacles or whatever. But squids, cuttlefish, nautilus, those are animals that have tentacles. Octopus have 8 arms. They have this bilateral symmetry. So if you're curious as like, why aren't they legs? A long time ago, there was a paper done about the coconut octopus, because if you've ever seen them, they will, rise up on their arms and kind of walk across the ocean floor, collecting shells and collecting different things. And they called it stilt walking. And they noticed in certain species of octopuses, they called it like bipedal locomotion. And so they were like, okay, well, do they have 2 legs then? Or do they have, whatever? And so there was that, I think it was like the whole anthropomorphizing of just like, well, clearly they will favor arms that they'll walk on. So those arms should be called legs. But scientists are like, no, hold up. They have 8 arms. Like, they don't have legs. They have 8 arms. They're the whole bilateral symmetry of it all. But the squids, the interesting thing about them, and you've seen this with cuttlefish too, is they have tentacles. And the reason they're called tentacles is because they have these tentacular clubs. So they have no suckers throughout the length of the whole entire appendage. And at the very end, they have this club. And the club has, depending on what species it is, there's some species of squid that have cat-like hooks in their tentacles and things like that. There are some that have a serrated, almost like teeth-like around the suckers on their tentacles. It just kind of, I guess, depends on, who their predators and prey are, who they have to fight against. Over hundreds of millions of years, they develop different kind of like weapons in their tentacles. And so I think that's the biggest difference when I'm talking about it, is just like, I'm like, it's not a tentacle because an octopus doesn't have that tentacular club. So, they have, 8 arms with 2 rows of biserial suckers, and that's essentially an arm. Unless you're a deep sea octopus, then you have that 1 row. So yeah, that's the long story long about octopus arms versus tentacles.
Love it.
That's so medieval, the different hooks and appendages.
So metal to watch. And I imagine they developed that because, they have, I think they did this study where they were able to look at the contents of like a sperm whale or something like that. It was primarily cephalopods. So it's just like they're fighting tooth and nail, like literally, to like get out of the whale's mouth. So they have, and you can see it on a lot of them, a lot of things that eat them, they have scars along the sides of their mouths and things like that from trying to eat those colossal and giant squids.
I don't think it's probably ever going to be possible. And like, even if it is possible, the ethics are debatable, but like live streaming giant squid and like whale fights would be so cool. Like that would be the most epic, like high stakes sport. Probably not like you wouldn't want to like incentivize it in any kind of way because then you're interfering. But like I want to know what goes on because that's it happening in the like complete dark, pretty much. Crazy.
Yeah. As a younger, like as I've seen more, science communicators and younger scientists go out there and pitch segments to like Schmidt Ocean Institute or Mbari. They have their ROVs too. They're coming up with really fun campaigns. Like if you go to their Instagram pages and things like that, you can tell they're getting young blood in, and they're like, what if we did this? Or what if we, called this thing this? And so I wouldn't be surprised if in the future they figure out how to do that. The footage, I mean, if you've seen it, it's like this super clear 4K footage. Like we're now able to see animals in a way that we've never seen them before. If you saw Secrets of the Octopus narrated by Paul Rudd, it's just you're looking at it and you're like, I can see the chromatophores in the octopus's skin. Like, the cameras that they have now are just insane. So I can't wait for them to develop better and better cameras.
I watch documentaries like that now. I haven't actually seen Secrets of the Octopus yet. I've only read the book, but I watch documentaries that are coming out now, and I get so jealous sometimes because I work in that field, and then I'll see someone get a shot of something that's just either it'll be like a once in a lifetime thing to see, or it will just be such a good shot and so well done. It almost ruins it for me because I get so like mad that I didn't get that. It's hard.
Well, Secrets of the Octopus is one to watch just because James Cameron is the one who did that. And so, like he says all the time that he's very inspired by the octopus. There's so many blogs that say, James Cameron kind of like used the octopus as he was like working on Avatar as a way to like the chromatophores or the color change or just all that kind of stuff. And so the way that they shot it and produced it, like they pulled out all the stops. So you'll definitely want to see it. They even have like the passing cloud display on an octopus where like it would almost be like your goosebumps having chromatophores, and imagine like you get a full body chill, but you like flash different colors.
Wow.
See, why can't I do that?
It would be so amazing. I mean, you kind of see it if somebody's embarrassed and they kind of turn red, the blood. But imagine if like you could, like, I don't know, if your goosebumps, you could change colors. Like it completely just, I don't know. That's what octopuses, feel. I can't imagine what that might feel like for them. I don't even know if they can feel it. There's so much research.
Yeah.
I wonder if humans could do that, if we would start like writing, like we could have like, oh no, written on our forehead when we felt bad or something. So totally unrelated topic. We had a good news mega thread a few weeks ago in the group, and it was brought to our attention by a member. Unfortunately, their comment seems to have disappeared, or I'd thank them by name, who told us that the eastern monarch butterfly population has nearly doubled in the last year. They came back with the new count, I think, on March 6th this year. Just for a little context, the eastern monarch butterfly migrates across the North American continent. It was one of the first insect migrations that was known about and mapped. And it migrates from up in the Great Lakes all the way down to this one little area of Michoacan, Mexico, and the state across the border from there, the Mexican state, not the U.S. state. And if you haven't seen photos of this, you should go look it up as soon as possible because it is truly incredible to see. Almost the entire migratory population of this species goes from a large portion of the North American continent to just 1 acre. And when I say 1 acre, I mean last year, the count before this one, it was just a few different small tracts of forest that together took up 5 acres. That's it. A continent's worth of something going down to 5 acres in Mexico every year. These butterflies, they cover the trees so much that there will be one on every twig. They'll weigh the branches down. You won't even be able to see a lot of the branches on these big conifer trees.
I was trying to think of like how octopuses and butterflies are similar. And the only thing that I could think of, haven't they done research on how butterflies use kind of like, is it just like the Earth's magnetic field? Like, or how do they like navigate to different areas? I think there's like a similar thing that like there's a species of octopus called the day octopus, and they also will kind of like take hints. They can form mental maps, and they actually there's like some evidence to believe that they're using like the Earth's kind of like magnetic or something like that to navigate actually where they are in time and place. I wonder if butterflies do that same thing.
That is a great question. I know that a lot of birds do that. Well, I feel like it might be something that's actually pretty testable, because I know you'd have to do a lot of modifications, obviously, but I know the way that they proved this in birds, a lot of it was that I'm wondering if I remember this enough to explain it. They had like very specific experiments that they did where they put magnets around the bird to modify where it felt like magnetic north was, and it changed the bird's behavior. So I wonder if that could actually be transferred to insects or transferred to other animals.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe it's like bees, butterflies, but I know that they were doing that on octopus because they were trying to figure out how octopuses form these mental maps, especially the octopus that's alive during that are alive diurnal species. They were just like, how are they able to remember? And they can remember what places have more food items and go straight back to where their den is, and it's just like, and they were just like, they must be utilizing, the Earth's magnetic kind of field to like orient them in space and time.
That is so cool. So, however the monarchs got there, the annual survey done by World Wildlife Fund and their partners this year found that monarchs occupied almost 11 acres of forest, which is just a little short of double last year's total. It's interesting to note that this is the only time I've seen a population documented in terms of land area instead of some estimate of like the number of individuals. So I have to guess maybe it's because they're so crowded that they take up close to a uniform density within the area they occupy, but that's something I'm hoping to say the wrong thing so that someone will correct me and I can learn what the actual answer is. This also got me wondering, like, are they going from 2 to 4 acres when they're supposed to be at like 10,000 acres or something like that? But the largest area they've ever been recorded occupying was in the late 1900s when it was 44 acres. That's about 30 years ago. So we're talking an area that's always been pretty small. I do think, though, that the good news here is a little different from how it's been presented, which is part of why I wanted to include this in the podcast episode, because all the headlines are saying that the migratory monarch population has effectively doubled in the last year, which is not necessarily incorrect. Like, that is represented by the area that they're taking up, but it's kind of representative of a trait of animals that reproduce really fast more than it's representative of necessarily of a trend. So like what you get with insects and probably with octos, I'm not sure. Is it the same way with octopi where they have big population fluctuations year to year? So you have to look at a lot of years to see what the trend is.
It's, it's really hard with them because, depending on the species and their brood size, like giant Pacific octopuses can lay nearly 500,000 eggs. And they've been saying that the yield is stable, meaning only 2 might, make it to maturity, like full run maturity. But I mean, they're of no threat. They're totally thriving in our oceans. So yeah, but haven't really know. All I know is like when you look at the consumption reports, you're like, how are we eating that many and they're still thriving in our oceans? It's insane how, I mean, if we're feeding the ocean's animals and they're in every single food web and feeding all these humans on our planet, it's just like they are really, they're really breeding fast. And so it's really something interesting to look at.
That's crazy. I know with amphibians, I did some work when I was doing wildlife field work with amphibians and monitoring these frog populations. And they would probably have generated a headline like this every other year because, for example, like spadefoot toads, if there's a hurricane that happens to go over their area, they'll have a breeding explosion that's so big. If you count the babies when they come out of the water, I caught more spadefoot toads in one day than over the entire rest of the time I worked on the project. Because they'll lay, thousands and thousands of eggs, and, some fraction of those will become froglets and some fraction will become adults. And in that process, the population will jump wildly higher, and then sometimes it'll crash the next year. It doesn't necessarily mean anything for the population either way. And looking at the graph of monarchs, the bad news is that the area being taken up at these sites has declined. It's a pretty obvious downward trend from the 90s to now. it actually hit the bottom at 2013, 2014 with less than 2 acres, went up to 6 in 2018 or 2019. It just kind of bobs around. But the silver lining of this, and I think this is kind of the actual good news, it's just less news and more like a biology fact, is that the fact that they can reproduce so quickly means that if everyone plants milkweed in the US and forest health is improved in Michoacan, the monarchs could recover really dramatically, really quickly. Unlike some species like of large mammals or other animals that, even if the world was perfect for them tomorrow, it would take a really long time for their populations to recover.
So everyone go out to your local nurseries, buy milkweed, plant it if you can.
Yeah, it just seems like when it comes to lifespan, these creatures or these animals that, do have these shorter lifespans. I mean, you just see it like with octopuses. People always ask me, did you create OctoNation to save the octopus? And I think it's kind of like an ego trip because I'm like, octopuses don't need saving. I was like, I think if anybody needs saving the most, it's probably us. We've only been here, 300,000 or so years. Octopuses have been here for hundreds of millions of years. And so we could learn a lot from them. And, whereas we're always trying to improve the length of time that we live here on this planet and how much income we make and all these things that humans do, it's like octopuses, live, sometimes they don't make it to their first birthday. And people go, oh, it's so sad. Their lifespan is so short. It's so sad. I'm just like, it's worked for them, So I don't know. It's just a really interesting perspective to have when you think of maybe creatures like the butterflies and like the octopuses. This is their secret. This is how they're going to outlive everything. So I think that's great news.
Yeah. Yeah. As a side note, that's one of the things I like the most about your work, Warren, is that it's not specifically geared around something that's like critically endangered. Like, I think it's really cool to just be so excited about something in the natural world and want to celebrate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, me too. Like but there's a lot of people who don't understand that. Like, I always try to think when people are really excited about something like a dinosaur, I always try to think of what could I do better? As like like the Antarctic octopus has antifreeze proteins in its skin and, making them more like Pokemon or making them more like whatever. But it's like we have these really cool things on our planet right now, that are worthy of like being collected or talked about or just making everybody go, wow, and they've figured a whole lot out. And so that's why, kind of coming back to, whatever, when I see media or news or headlines that exaggerate stuff or be like, we've never seen this before. I'm like, yeah, I guess it's because we're new on this planet, but this has been happening for hundreds of millions of years.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it's new to us maybe, and it's newly documented to some people, but I have a network of thousands of underwater photographers and people that are not professionals at all, that are just, they live out in the ocean and they've seen these interactions over and over and over again. And so I'm thankfully, I have this network where we reach millions of people a month, and I get firsthand accounts from so many people every single day where they're just like, this isn't news.
Right.
It's in your life. I was like, but it's news to these people and it's news to people on the media who, and I was like, so I always love to my next blog is going to be about that predator-prey interaction of the shark, just so that we can kind of set the record straight on a lot of these things.
I'm looking up the Antarctic octopus now.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many species. I mean, we always say the number is always like, there's over 300 species. And like every single time I see, because I have a huge collection of just photos, and I can tell, like with blue rings, I know that there's just so many different species of them, but we haven't really uncovered on a DNA level that. I'm just like, but I'm like, these are clearly two different types of blue rings. So yeah.
Grad students out there once again.
Yeah.
Do you find that they're different? Do you think that the differences are mostly like based on geography that you've noticed?
Yeah, just based on whatever predators they have in their area. What I've seen based on whatever, like, is there like there's a species of octopus that has like where like the conger eel lives, and the way that they respond to those eels is like some of them, what they'll do is they'll throw their arms behind their head and protect their organs. And they'll flatten their suckers completely, almost as if they're creating a shield. And they're like flexing their suckers where they're flat, and there's no way that you can bite any individual sucker. And so they're just exhibiting behaviors that I'm like, I've never seen that in another Octopus vulgaris before. So it clearly has to be over hundreds of millions of years. This octopus in this area is exhibiting completely different behaviors as a result of the predators in the area.
Right, because they don't learn from each other because of the way the generations are split up. So it has to be actually selected.
We don't know
for.
that. I always say, like, anytime somebody says that, I'm like, we don't know. Like, they could have some innate programming that we are so aloof to. So we know that cuttlefish have embryonic learning where they can learn about their environment prior to even hatching. So they develop food preferences. They understand who their predators are prior to popping out of their eggs. So it's really interesting.
That is wild.
I want it could be a TV series, it could be something like a sitcom about octopuses going to like octopus school, where like they're like, okay, like that, and that's how they learn about their different predators. But it's sort of like, however they figure it out, of like the different species go through the different things, and they're like, okay, class, when you encounter this predator, this is what you do. But it's like an ultra secret octopus society, and so like no one is allowed, like they can't let like the people know about it. So like they're like, oh yeah, we're just like bored and we just know this, but they're like actually like going to schools and they have like societies. Could be fun.
And honestly, what you just said is exactly why OctoNation exists, from the standpoint of like, I hope to say things and I hope to write things and I hope to hire science writers to write things that inspire someone like you to be like, hey, I need to make this, or I need to pitch this, or you know what, this is the first time I've heard this, I can create this. Because I think that once you see something and you're inspired by something, you're like, you know what, maybe I'm going to be the person that creates the documentary that does XYZ. So, I mean, that's the whole entire reason we exist, is to inspire that wonder for somebody to go, you know what, I want that. I'm going to go off and create, something. So that's really cool.
Because that's like part of my favorite part of like the natural world and learning through things is like the wonder of it all, where like truly like truth is stranger than fiction, where like if there's any kind of like, oh, what if there's aliens out there that, have this adaptation or this adaptation? I'm like, if you want to like find weird adaptations, like there's so many of them here. Like I can point out a bug, I can point out a deep sea creature. Like things are crazy. Like there's so much like depth and texture to like the world. And I'm just like, whatever, if you're like, things that fly, I'm like, there's so many things that don't fly. Like, have we got a story for you? Like,
some people tell me that they don't like octopuses. I'm just like, what species? Like, what are you talking about? Because I mean, there's a cute one, like the flapjack octopus. How could you not like that pancake little octopus thing? Or, I'm just like, if you're weird about like, it's just the arms. I'm like, okay, there are really stubby, this stubby squid. Like there are so many, things. I mean, you just haven't found the species of octopus, for you. So it's really choose your own adventure.
It's truly the SNL Stefan skit where he goes, this club has everything, but it's the earth about different animals. Because true, and like, plant species, like bacteria, it's like, this club has everything. Like there will be something, I guarantee you, that you find interesting, because there's so many, like just statistically, like, there's got to be. You just haven't found it yet. But like your new favorite thing is out there.
So I actually have a clip to roll so that we can all. I'm gonna play the audio from it, and then we can talk about it and talk about some memes knowledge.
Okay, so we're watching this video.
It's a great little snapshot, and then we'll move on.
Okay, we see. You can pause it. Well, I guess you could pause it with the octopus on the screen.
Blinking, you miss it, really.
Go back to where you see it. Okay, so what you're looking at right now is a Maori octopus. This is the largest octopus in the southern hemisphere. So most people are very familiar with that giant Pacific octopus that lives in cold waters of Alaska and things like that. But the Maori octopus is one of the largest species in the southern hemisphere. So large that their front pair of arms, and this is really strange, they can grow up to be 9 feet long.
Just the front pair?
Just the front pair. The other arms don't grow as long as that two front pair. But they're also known as like the beefcake octopus because their arms are, it's like Flex Friday for this species. They're super, super strong and they're brave. There's a very famous photo of a Maori octopus. And have you ever seen like those big crabs like that stand up on those, I don't know what species of crab it is. Maybe I don't know, those dungeon crabs or like those ones that have
The spider crabs?
Yeah, spider crabs. They will literally canvas and entrap multiple ones all at the same time, just kind of go after and then just grab and then go back to their den.
I think I saw that on a documentary once. It was crazy.
Yeah, they're just not afraid. They're very brave. But yeah, so what you're seeing is that Maori octopus on the back, just behind the shark's eyes, clinging onto its body. So that's kind of what you're seeing. And everybody said that this was a mystery. Like no one's ever seen this before. Like this represents the wonder and the allure of the ocean. That this might be, they said sharktopus, they said maybe Uber.
I was going to say Uber.
We're saying normally, octopuses aren't, this high in the water column, which is true. This species is a benthic, so it's like a bottom dwelling species. But if a shark is hungry, it's going to go down there and try to find some food. But what's really interesting about, the octopus, when you look at like their suckers, they have this thing where like a pool toy or like, I don't know, if like in your shower, you have something where you can like have a suction cup. They have one more. They have all of these radial muscles inside. If you've ever seen a sucker, they have all these, what it looks like, almost like a tree trunk where you have all
like a bullseye.
Yeah, the age line. And so, but all of those are muscles. They're radial muscles. And when they latch onto something, they can stick there. It's almost like a Chinese finger trap. You're not going to really be able to, unless it releases like a chemical signal that says, hey, let go. And they can all let go at the same time because we can be free, then it's pretty much wherever it's going to be. And that's why you didn't see too much movement in that octopus. It was not moving at all. It was latched on like that. And so octopuses will do that and they've learned how to do this for hundreds of millions of years, to eels, to sharks, to humans. You've seen octopuses in Hawaii that are just latched on to humans. And the reason that they do this is because everything in the ocean wants to eat them. They are a floating protein bar. They're in almost every single food web. And Jennifer Mather did research and she said it the best when it was just like, they're never safe. Like they have 360 degrees of predators around them all, and even at night, these nocturnal species, that's when eels hunt. They're nocturnal species at all, and they can fit into all of the dens that the octopuses live in. So they're not safe. And so they developed this clinging mechanism to essentially give them the ability to, like I said, like that Chinese finger trap, latch on. And then they figure if every single sucker is latched onto something, then nothing can bite it because it's latched onto it. And even if it could, and say that the limb gets dismembered, well, what we know about octopus arms is that 2/3 of their neurons are located in their arms. And each arm has clusters of nerves like ganglia, or it's called ganglion. And they have what's called like satellite brains. And those satellite brains can actually run the arm without the host, without the use of the central brain. So even if that shark were to have bit off, say, an octopus arm, that arm's not going down without a fight. It can still latch on and it can still be active for up to an hour and still perform functions like latching on to the soft tissue of a dolphin's like blowhole or gills. It can still suffocate and do damage, even if it's not connected to its host. And that's probably just evolution, where it was just like, okay, everything in this ocean wants to eat me. So octopuses have really figured out through color change, through inking, through that clinging, mechanism, through chemotactile, they have all their olfactory organs in their suckers. And what's really interesting, there was research done where in their suckers, they have the ability to sense their salts. Because everyone was like, how do octopuses not get tangled up, with their own arm like that? They can sense it. They have chemotactile sensation. So they know when they're touching their arms versus touching another thing. And if they're touching another thing that is food, that sucker and those radial muscles latch on I think those giant Pacific octopuses, they say they can move rocks up to like 30 pounds. And so they're super, super strong. And so that's kind of what you're seeing in this video. It's not Hank the octopus and, Finding Dory. It's not a Pixar movie plot. It's an octopus that's like, I'm looking for the best possible time to break free. And once I do, I'm jetting. But it's in a really bad spot because octopuses in that open ocean area, they're, like I said, a floating protein bar. There's not much they can do. There's a type of behavior called dematic behavior, which, speaking of butterflies and speaking
We
of,
found the crossover.
yeah, those eye spots. And so an octopus, like day octopuses have those eye spots that can be like, hey, look, I'm bigger than you think I am, and they can kind of like puff out their chest and be like, you don't want to mess with this, when in all actuality, it's like, you're not going to do anything. So that's kind of like, that's just like one of those behaviors that you see. So it's really interesting when I see articles. It's like I'm like, there's so many research papers you guys could have looked up to understand what.
Well, it's kind of like what you were saying about having contact with so many photographers and so many people spending time out in the water, that they have all seen all of these things at some point, or it's very hard to find something that collectively humanity has not seen before. It's in some way. I mean, it's one of the best things about going outside is that you basically will always see something that might have only happened once, or that is very unusual to see, just because there's so many different combinations of things that could happen, that you could be not the first person to see it, but you could be like one of the only people ever to see a thing. Like yesterday, I was out in a pitcher plant bog, and the pitcher plant flowers had popped up for these yellow pitcher plants, but not the pitchers yet. So it was this odd situation. It's a field of these giant bulb flowers that look kind of alien in themselves, but nothing. No, the plant's not eating anything yet. And I found a jumping spider living inside one of the flowers, which is not a crazy place for it to be, but it's just such an unusual, because the pitcher plant is so rare and only found in like certain places. It's not endangered, but it's unusual to see. It feels so special to see anything associated with it at the same time. And then I went around and checked all the other flowers and didn't find anything.
Yeah, that relationship kind of ties into, I know that you have some jellies, and you have the species of octopus called the Argonaut, who is able to kind of 3D print a case around her body.
Crazy.
And she secretes calcite out of two specialized arms, like these membranes. And she essentially, it's called an egg casing. It's not necessarily a shell. But yeah, when they're young and they're in kind of like, they stay forever in this like, free floating space. And they've evolved to really figure out, okay, how do I become a master of this environment? How do I utilize what's in this environment for protection? And you'll see them cling atop the bell of jellies. And they'll kind of utilize their stinging tentacles as protection in the open ocean. You see that with blanket octopuses. You see that with argonauts and males. I just kind of picture like, males, because they're so tiny in comparison to the females when it comes to the argonauts. Them just like a noble steed riding atop riding atop a jelly and being like, seeing this beautiful, person who he's going to give his hexacotylis to, his mating arm. And then it's like his last hurrah, and obviously after that he enters senescence and dies. It's funny to think of that these octopuses have really figured out, depending on what environment they're in, you see evidence of clinging in a lot of different species, like they cling onto objects, they cling onto whatever, but it's just really fun to watch.
When they cling on to other animals, is that always, or that's a broad word, but is that typically a defensive thing, or is it circumstantial? Like if they're in the pictures where they're on that jellyfish, is that also like hiding from the jelly, or is that for other purposes?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's there hasn't been that much research done on this now. I know that Alex Schnell is really interested in animal intelligence more broadly. She was the host of Secrets of the Octopus, and she has this project called One World, Many Minds. It's a brilliant name for like that project. And she looks into animal intelligence, not just in octopuses, but I think she's really interested in this idea of what is tool use, and is this tool use, and are they aware of what they're doing? Because they also snack on their host, and they snack on it. There's research done. The 7-armed octopus it had been seen snacking on and also riding these massive, jellies and things like that. So I think for the most part, it's less defensive, and more like this makes the most sense. And also from an energy expenditure standpoint, it's like, why worry about, all this kind of stuff when I could just ride this thing? You know what I mean? Another interesting thing about the Argonaut too, that we've seen, that there's not that much research done on it, but they will form like these chains where females that have eggs will, because, with the Argonauts, they have this kind of like egg casing. They'll find other females, and it's almost like they're squishy bits, like, because they know, okay, if something tries to eat me, the only thing that's not protected is the squishy parts of my body. So if I find another female and we just kind of like lock arms together and it's just two shells, then maybe we can't get eaten. And so you'll see like 20, 30, 40 of them all together in some way, in some sort of way, to try to figure out, okay, if we band together, then, and you see this with dolphins, you see this with so many different animals, where they're kind of band together if there's predators like looming around. But this species of octopus, and what we know about octopuses is that like what we thought was that they're antisocial. They don't want anything to do with one another. But what we're learning, the more and more that we dive in to seeing, some of this behavior, is like there's octopus tetrachus who lives in communities and, have interesting relationships. There's the Argonauts that have this, relationship. There's larger Pacific striped octopuses that mate beak to beak, and stick around each other for a while. They're not like, so it's just, there's so many different species and so many different things to look at.
Earlier, you were talking about how if their arm gets disconnected, it can continue to act for a while. Do you think that the arm kind of knows it's been disconnected? Like, does the behavior change or become, I don't know, more aggressive or more optimized for, distracting from the main octopus? Or is it kind of like, it's like just kind of still running as though it's attached?
The way that I explain this, because this is a really fun thing to like talk to kids about, is like, I was like, imagine you're watching TV or you're watching Netflix and you're like, oh, I can't find the remote. And you're like, but I'm watching this. I want to keep watching this. Then you just say, hey, R4, like your right fourth arm or whatever. It's like, can you go find the remote? Because I'm trying to watch TV and I know that you're perfectly able to do that. You have chemotactiles that you can smell, you can taste, you're going to be able to find the remote. But I want to watch this. And so an octopus essentially has that ability to like give demands, and kind of the functions that the arms can perform without the host are things like they can go, there are some arms that they've said have almost like a different personality. I hesitate to say that because I've been like hit on the hand by scientists, but it's almost as if there's an arm that has more confidence to be the arm that hunts. There's an arm that has more it's almost like they learn to have different things that they go about doing. But they can't perform like really advanced things. That's like, that directive comes from the host. But I'm curious. I know that when they've dismembered arms for science purposes, that an octopus will still not grip to its own skin. So it still has the ability to recognize itself, even if it's not connected to its host. So that research they did, it wasn't too long ago, but they put octopus like cells in petri dishes, and even after like the dismembered things would not grab hold of it, but they would grab hold of things that like they knew were tasty or were food items before. Mm-hmm. So it's like they can discern things without the host. So it's almost like they're like this thing that's just like operating. That's why when they did research about the Maori octopus and the bottlenose dolphins, that the bottlenose dolphins learned that they needed to essentially tenderize the octopus, or they needed to disconnect the arms from the host. And like what they do is they'll grab hold of an octopus, they'll fly out of the water, and they'll slam it across the ocean surface, almost as if, they're like a fisherman who, there's a process called curling, and it's like a 2-hour process where a lot of people in the Mediterranean eat octopus every single day. It's very common over there. And the process is they get an octopus, they bite in the middle of its eyes, that, kills them humanely. And then they spend the next hour, 30 minutes to an hour, thrashing the octopus on rocks. And because they say when an octopus essentially is killed, because the majority of its body is muscle, it will essentially like rigor mortis essentially will set in and it'll become rubbery. And so there are people over there like, oh, you don't want a rubbery type of experience. And so dolphins somehow learned how to do this. They learned how they needed to do the same process. And if they didn't do that, what could potentially happen is what happened to a bottlenose dolphin there, where it asphyxiated and it washed ashore, and it had an octopus that was also dead too. So nobody won in that fight. They both were found dead, and it was because it asphyxiated. And so what we know about dolphins, though, is they can learn from each other. You know, their lifespans are, those bottlenose dolphins, they can live, the females, up to 60 years. And they can pass down knowledge. They can communicate with one another. So I was always curious, because as I was reading the research on this a long time ago, I was like, I wonder if who learned from who? Because if you know, people in the Mediterranean have been doing this since Aristotle published his works, and he accounted for like how people eat octopus back then. And I was like, you know, did humans learn it from the dolphins? Did dolphins learn it from the humans? Like, is it just, you know, like how did, you know, it's just really something really interesting to ponder and think about, how this shared knowledge of how they knew to do this to the octopus. It's just really fascinating to think about.
You've heard of the chicken and egg scenario. Now get ready for the human dolphin octopus scenario. I had so many thoughts while like listening to all of that. One of the like the different hands of like having different confidence to do things. It's almost like right or left-handedness in people, but like 1 through 8, but like specifically, it's like if your right hand was like, I'm really good at brushing my teeth, and your left hand was like, but like if we need to write an essay, like I'm the guy to call.
And they have the way that they do it is it's R1, L1, R2, L2. You know, they have, like, that's the system. And so it's R1 through 4 and L1 through 4. And that's how like scientists do it. And then there's even through the suckers, they have a very it's crazy the way that they have it all done, but they have it all mapped out to where like if they're studying octopuses, they can say R3, and then it's like there's this sucker mapping.
Oh.
It's really interesting, you know, to the fact that just their arms can grow back, you know, as good as new too. Whereas when you think of like a lizard, you think, you know, it's going to grow back a nub or whatever. But from like the outer nerve bundles to those radial muscles to whatever, it grows back like complete. And I was like, I wonder if it's like, is it learning again? Like, do those satellite brains, like, do they have to like resync, you know, or like, how does it work? Is it like a Wi-Fi system? Like, how does this, like, you know, how is it? I just don't know. It's so interesting to think about, like, what is that new arms experience? Hey guys, just got here. Like, can you catch me up on like how our life was?
Like backing it up to like the server of the central body, and then like getting the download of information later.
For sure.
And then like with all of the like how strong their suckers are, I'm like, that would be a super cool biomimicry thing to explore, of like being able to carry a lot of weight with not a huge like impact on what you're carrying. That
They've
would
tried
be
to figure that out. I think they're doing that with drones now. They like put an octopus arm, kind of like biomechanical thing, on a drone, and they like lifting things up. So I can tell like scientists are already kind of playing with, you know, the technology that is the octopus's arms and suckers. So it's going to be really interesting to watch in the future, these drones that have, you know, octopus arm looking things.
You're like, oh yeah, you need to pick something up, but you're like, oh, this is like sensitive cargo or whatever. We don't know how to damage it. Well, you're like, no problem, just like suction cup and then pick it up.
Another random butterfly connection I was just reminded of is that they did this study where they trained caterpillars to avoid the color white. And it's a species that normally their normal host plant is typically white. The flowers are typically white. And then they showed that the caterpillars that they had trained, when they metamorphosed into adults, the adults would still avoid the color white. So the memory, you know, just in case no one has read the exact same stuff as me, when butterflies go into the cocoon, they don't just, I always pictured it before as kind of like growing things outwards more, but it's more like their entire body gets turned into goo, and then an entirely new body grows out of that goo. But it turns out that there's a strip of neurons that I don't think that it's in this spot normally. Like I think as a caterpillar, I think it moves. It just like reforms and detaches and moves, and it just goes to somewhere on one side of the abdomen, and it stores all the memories from when they were a caterpillar, and those survive in some kind of useful form until they're an adult.
That is what I'm going to spend the rest of my night researching.
Yeah.
That is so fascinating.
And there was some other caterpillars. I don't know if it was the same study, if it was a different one. Like when they were caterpillars, they would like play like an audio sound and then would like shock the caterpillars. So then they learned to associate that sound with being shocked. So they would flinch whenever they heard the sound. And then as adults, after they metamorphosized and like turned into goo and then came back, they played the sound and the adult butterflies had a reaction. So they could remember this thing that happened to them as a caterpillar and, were affected by it, like wanted to avoid it as adults. And I'm like, I don't know how you remembered anything in your goo brain, but that was cool.
That's why when I look at species like the mimic octopus, the ones that, they say can mimic over 14 different, depending on their environment or their situation or what predators they see, can kind of morph into something that predator would be like, oh, that's just the standard run-of-the-mill flatfish. Don't need to worry about anything there. Like, that's why I hesitate to be like, well, we don't know how they know, but it could be like this innate map that they're given. Hey, here's all the color patternations that you're going to need for this life. Like we truly don't. They just don't know.
Some kind of crazy zip file in all of them.
Yeah.
Zip file. Here are your possible skins.
They all get the download when they go to octopus school.
Like, this is your video game. Here's all the skins you can have, pre-programmed. Go. Good luck.
Yeah. It also, still, even if, they have one limb detached, still, suffocating a dolphin or, taking out their predators, remind me of the, classic illustration of, a heron or an egret has, eaten the frog, but the frog's arms are out and are choking the egret, and it says, never give up. It's, a little cartoon. And so I'm like, this is just the ocean version of that, where it's sure, are you an octopus who got bit by a shark? Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's the end. You can still, you clog up the gills or whatever, and then it's that's your game
Not
over.
Even that, but it's if the octopus does manage to get away, and all it had to do is dismember, one of its arms to get away, it can still live a full life, and that arm can still grow back. So the fact that it was just that nature just decided, hey, let's figure this problem out. You're still going to need this arm. So let's just figure out how to generate as good as new, situation. So it's always been fun to me to watch. And the way that they grow is so funny, because what you would think is that it somehow just grows and, whatever. But what happens is at the base of where the arm is dismembered, it sprouts a replica mini arm.
Whoa.
With suckers, with these microscopic suckers and whatever. And then that arm kind of gets longer, but it starts off as a mini, and I have a picture of it. I'll send it to you guys so you can put it, but it's it starts off as a little mini arm, and then kind of get longer. And also depending, because everyone just goes, will it always do that? If the octopus is senescent and it loses its arm in senescence, typically the body, is just hey, we don't have energy to dedicate to growing this arm, so they don't do it as fast, or if they get eaten. Yeah, it's funny how all that works.
Crazy.
I would have thought it was it would regrow adult size, but just basically 3D print the adult version of it, but to have your the full arm and then the little stump, and then you got a tiny little arm growing off the end. I love that. That's amazing. And I also think if any other people, want to get into ocean film making, I think there should be the equivalent of a most eligible bachelor, but the tastiest morsel, because there's so many things out there where it's as an octopus, it's a hard life when you're so delicious to everything.
Yeah.
And so kind of like rabbits on land, where I'm you just get eaten by everything.
It's the same thing. If you look at the octopus's eyes, that was the thing that drew me to the octopus. I remember the thing that kicked off everything was its eye.
Uh-huh.
When I locked eyes with an octopus and saw those horizontal pupils, And like I say it like another video, but I truly felt like I was staring into space from the standpoint of you could just tell. It's almost as if like you have a dog, or anything like that, and the dog says, "Hey, I need to go outside," and you can somehow tell. I was like looking at this octopus, and I was like, there's somebody in there. There's something going on in there. And it was so strange to me to have that sort of interaction with an animal like an octopus. And then as I learned more about their eyes and the fact that they, through chromatic aberration could essentially potentially see planes of light, and that's how they see color. And then even the fact that they have nearly 360-degree vision, because again, if everything in the ocean wants to eat you, evolution decides that you actually can't afford to have, a blind spot. Yeah. So what happened is that even the nerves behind the octopus's eye route completely differently than the most animals, from the standpoint of it essentially can, like you see like an octopus's eye right here, but it can essentially, those bulbs can raise up ever so slightly and almost go like this and have a 360-degree picture of its environment, so that you can't really sneak up on it. And so when I just kept seeing all this stuff, I'm just like, they truly have thought of everything as it relates to survival mode, like growing their limbs back, not having a blind spot, being able to like literally disappear, having their primary color, in environments where they're at a certain depth be red, because that's an invisible, wavelength at that depth. It's like they've really, truly figured it out. And luckily they did, because they feed a lot of things in the ocean that survive off of them. I just think the more and more you get into them, the more and more, and I'm sure that it's like this with anybody listening that has a hyper focus on anything, but you're just like, look at my thing.
You guys need to understand. Yeah.
So as our little final section, we usually do a little a listener questions thread, and this time I put it up just before the podcast, and kind of to see if anyone would notice, I used different versions of the pluralized octopus to just to kind of troll people for a minute. And the two questions that I've gotten, one is from the webcomic artist Zoodraws, commented and said, "How uncomfortable is it to say the word octopuses?" So that's the first question. And then the second thing was not a question, but a correction, where someone just wrote *octopuses in response to my post.
This is such a funny thing too, because what I've learned, because Secret of the Octopus has now been transcribed to Japanese, to Spanish, to it's been published in Germany. And what I've learned is like how all of these different people, one, say octopus, but two, just kind of like how here in the States, I never would have thought this, but like how prude people are when it comes to certain like words or things like that. Because the reason why people, and I think, why octopi is so popular, is just people are so adverse to saying something that could sound like pusses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they go, that can't be right. It can't be right because it sounds too close to something that's vulgar. And what I've learned just from, one scientist, but just also just like other people, is like, they're just like, what? Like they just don't, it's like a foreign concept to them, where like, I find that that's the reason why most people will prefer that, is just because they're like, no, like I can't say it. And so I always tell people like, in OctoNation, it's always octopuses. But if you want to be super geeky, our secret handshake is obviously octopodes. And I have two shirts. One says technically it's octopuses and technically it's octopodes. And so people can buy whichever one they want. But I always find when I wear that shirt, I'll be at a gas station and some random guy will come up to me and be like, I thought it was octopi. Like, how long do you have?
How long do you have?
I run OctoNation. But you also have to ask me, we can pretend it's a question of somebody's. The latest research that came out with the blue-lined octopus, because it turns out they will pierce the female's aorta and paralyze them before mating. So let's just pretend you asked that question.
Whoa!
What if they discovered about the blue-lined octopus?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked. No, the blue-lined octopus, they just did this research, and I'm surprised it hasn't gone more viral than it has, because I thought as soon as like the male manosphere podcasters got a hold of this one, it was insanely viral. because they found out the male blue lined. And so everyone's familiar typically with a blue ringed octopus. But the blue lined on the mantle, instead of having rings, it has lines that almost look like these iridescent like lines, but they're not iridescent. They are iridescent. What they found was that the males, they always knew that they were tinier than the females. So like say this is a female, a blue lined octopus, and this is a male blue lined octopus. This is kind of like the size difference of them. And so what they know about, males is if they catch a female at the wrong time, he could be a snack. And so I guess somehow the males figured out, because the octopus's heart is just actually right here behind its mantle. This is where all of its organs is. And their hearts are actually right here back behind their mantle. So what the male will do is he'll attach to the female and essentially will pierce her aorta with his beak and inject a neurotoxin. And so we know that she's just okay, I have this in my body. It's not going to affect me, but it does have a paralytic kind of effect for 45 minutes. And so what he does is he'll mate with her and then he'll swim off, and she's still it slows her breathing. She doesn't change colors as rapidly. She turns kind of this pale color. And then after 45 minutes, she's back to her normal self, and she can go, fertilize those eggs or do whatever. But the male is able to get away. And that's the whole entire reason that they did it. And so they published this research literally 2 weeks ago. It's just a really interesting adaptation that they found in this species of octopus. That it's oh, wow, he's essentially going up and poisoning her so that he can survive. So I just thought it was a really interesting adaptation that people should look into. And it's really cute too, though, when you see the mating, he literally looks like a little blue lined octopus hat. and so it's really fun. And sometimes she'll walk around and he'll still be there. So it's really something really funny to see. Maybe I can find some photos and send them to you so you can put them in the thing.
Yeah, totally.
I would also be curious to know, she's sort of, paralyzed, slow down a little bit for 45 minutes. How does that affect her survival in terms of you're not as able to evade predators, change color? I would be really curious to
yeah. What I know about that is any female blue-ringed octopus that has eggs is not in her right mind, from the standpoint of as soon as she starts laying those eggs, senescence happens. And it's this, I call it cellular suicide, where it's a switch goes off in her brain, and she starts secreting things that slow down her metabolism, that turn her brain into nothing matters. Eating doesn't matter. Nothing matters except these kids, and making sure that they're aerated. There's no bacteria growing on them, and so as a result of that, they oftentimes get eaten, prior to their eggs hatching, because they just turn into, So it's just, again, it's one of those things where it's every single octopus has a really unique brooding strategy. The blue-lined octopus, they'll do something. Well, they'll throw their arms behind their head and create a brood basket where they'll put their eggs on top of their head and almost cover them up like this. And they also will inject a little bit of tetrodotoxin in their eggs. So it's just really interesting how it all works. And that's, I guess, one thing that you can take from this podcast is just I really need to look back into octopuses, because it's they have completely different things that they all do. It's they have different abilities, superpowers, brooding strategies, defense mechanisms. And it's just also interesting to see play out.
Lots of octopus themed hats that can come out of this as well. There's a lot of meat on that bone. Metaphorically, though, because octopus don't have bones.
And I think I told you on the other podcast that I was on that the female blanket octopus, it's the same thing, where the male is the size of her pupil, but she grows at a certain time of her life. All of a sudden, these biological stalks, like Jack and the Beanstalk, sprout from her body, and they're these stalks that have these calcareous things that she can braid her eggs into. And so it's just Jack and the Beanstalk, but brooding style. And she spins she will literally braid these eggs to these stalks that grow out of her body. So it's just something that, again, really interesting to see, something that we detail on OctoNation's website. And We're always writing really cool stuff. So definitely come check it out.
So that actually corresponds to the question I was going to ask you, which is what's new and where can people go to find your stuff?
Yeah. So there's always something that's new. We're writing right now, we're finishing up the article on what we talked about today, just because there's so many headlines being like, nobody knows what's going on between this shark and this octopus. And I'm just like, oh, pick me.
Yeah.
I have literally 12 papers that correspond to this, this behavior that's been outlined for a long, long time. And it's just cool to see all the similarities. Anytime there's this viral video of an octopus that's on a pregnant woman's belly. And everybody knows Wild Green memes, they're not going to comment anything like this under this video, but they're like, I wonder if they know that, I wonder if the octopus knows she's pregnant. And it's like, they're like, I wonder if, there's all these things and things like that go viral really easily just because. And I'm just like, well, more importantly, you need to protect your baby against venom. All octopuses have cephalotoxin. If that octopus were to bite down on your stomach, it wouldn't be good, and let's first get that out of the way. Luckily, octopuses for the most part, they're not too bitey. There are certain species like the ruby octopuses that will gnaw, on scientists, they're almost like a German Shepherd or whatever. They're really like a puppy. But most species, they will only bite or envenomate something that they know that they can eat. They don't do it out of really aggression. And so that's just kind of what I've seen. So there's always something, there's always new research, always everything, and we publish it every week on OctoNation. So you'll see it.
Well, I want to jump in and answer the question of how uncomfortable are we supposed to feel when we say octopuses only as uncomfortable as you let society make you feel. That's the answer.
100%.
That's right. We'll go out to a choir of chorus and leopard frogs sent in from listener Cat's backyard. Until next time, I'm Rhett.
I'm Io.
I'm Warren.
And happy Year of the Frog, and roll the chorus.